Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Melinda Nusafora. The blowback from the murder of Saudi journalist and dissident Jamal Khashoggi continues to haunt the kingdom's crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman. Fresh off a multi-nation tour to North Africa and the G20 summit in Argentina, bin Salman received a strong rebuke from the US Congress. Lawmakers were briefed by CIA Chief Gina Haspel, which led to the filing of a resolution condemning bin Salman's role in Khashoggi's murder. The damning assessment has put Republican senators directly at odds with the White House. US President Donald Trump has largely sided with the embattled Crown Prince rather than accept his own intelligence agency's assessment. The fallout is already brewing in Washington, with calls for the US to end its military support for Saudi operations in Yemen. Meanwhile, in a surprising move, Saudi Arabia's King Salman has invited Qatar to attend the next GCC meeting, which brings together Gulf countries. The invite came just days after Qatar announced it would be leaving OPEC. The energy-rich country has endured a Saudi-led blockade, largely pushed forward by bin Salman, for more than a year. Well, 2 months after Jamal Khashoggi's death, and the fallout is still continuing. To break down the newest developments, I'm joined by Özcan Tikit, who is a journalist at TRT Haber, focusing on Turkish foreign affairs, and Mahjoub Zweri, who is an associate professor and director of the Gulf Studies Centre at Qatar University in Doha. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Thank you. Mahjoub, I'm going to start with you. Now, the US Congress has passed a non-binding resolution stating that Mohammed bin Salman was complicit in the killing of Jamal Khashoggi. But this kind of resolution doesn't really require any kind of affirmative action. It's almost more of a statement. Can we see anything positive coming out of this? Is it going to make any tangible change?
It's about momentum. It's about keeping the momentum on this issue. The Americans, the Congress members, want to make sure that the issue is still hot, is important to the congressmen, and Mohammed bin Salman has to face the reality that he is responsible of this murder. I think that's the first thing. The second thing is actually putting the president himself under more questions about his credibility. They saw the same, or they heard the same evidence the president heard and read, and he came to a different conclusion how this happened. So it's about questioning the credibility of the president and actually what he should do to avoid more difficulties within the congressmen. And the third point actually here quickly is the fact that international community should pay enough attention to the leadership of Saudi Arabia and what they are doing. And it sent a clear message that this leadership is not reliable, and you have to make sure that you keep your eye on it, otherwise there will be more difficulties.
And I mean, speaking of difficulties, Özcan, I'm going to ask you, the White House, this rift between the White House, Congress and the intelligence community is just deepening, and it's now laid bare for the whole world to see. Can Donald Trump still keep weathering this storm? Has he lost his credibility?
I guess there are lots of reasons why Donald Trump is behaving in this way. Actually, he's behaving with the spirit of a business, and he's not behaving with the spirit of a statesman. And he has lots of special relations with the MBS and Saudi royal family. By the way, his son-in-law has lots of reasons, and he's one of the guys who is in danger at this situation. So I guess he will be keep this way. He'll keep going on this way, and I think he can do that because as a president he has the power, he has the authority, and as he had said before, even the Congress passes a resolution against the Saudi royal family or that can damage the relation between him, not the United States, between him and the royal family, he will veto this resolution, and I guess he will keep this attitude.
Well, it's certainly putting him at odds with some very powerful senators. The mutual outrage over his handling has almost seemed to bring the opposing sides together in a bipartisan way that we haven't seen for quite a while. First of all, I just want you to have a listen. We're going to have a listen to Republican Senator Lindsey Graham. This is what he had to say.
If the Saudi government is going to be in the hands of this man, For a long time to come, I find it very difficult to be able to do business because I think he's crazy. I think he is dangerous, and he has put the relationship at risk.
And in a rare show of bipartisan support, this is what the Democratic Senator Christopher Coons had to say. I think it's time for us to send a clear and strong signal to our close ally Saudi Arabia that actions that violate our core values, like murdering a US resident journalist, have consequences. Majub, they are both very strong statements from opposite sides of the aisle there in the United States. Do you think now there is enough political discontent for Congress to vote to end US military support for the Saudi-led campaign in the Yemen war?
As you know, 63 of the members, they already agree on the fact that the war in Yemen should be stopped, and they are pushing to a resolution to end the war in Yemen. But I don't think so the focus will be ending the war in Yemen. It's about also accountability. What happened in Yemen? Someone should be accountable. Someone should be responsible of the disasters the Yemeni people have faced in the last 3 years. So everything is happening now in Sweden about the peaceful discussions is not the end of the story. I think the administration tried to escape away and saying there is something going on. We are doing something in Sweden. We pushed to have a solution, but I'm not sure this is the only thing they can do. That's the reason why the congressman actually insisting that is what the administration is doing is not enough. Pompeo is not doing enough to hold Mohammed bin Salman accountable. On the other issue, I think we have to take into consideration that the administration also is not taking enough seriously what the congressman is doing. It seems that the president himself feels that he is, as a president, he has everything in hand and he can do everything without being held accountable. And I think that the congressman saying, no, hold on. There is a congressman, we have a responsibility, you have to take us seriously. And I think that is the reason why I said keeping the momentum and pushing the president under severe pressure to go himself and do something. And that is, actually, I think, in the meeting held between the director of intelligence in Turkey and the congressman, that is evidence that the congressman is walking ahead to give more evidence on what happened in Istanbul and saying to the president, look, hold on, you have to take seriously what's happening.
Ozcan, moving away from the United States, Saudi Arabia's King Salman has invited Qatar to join the GCC summit. Now, we know that Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman was very instrumental in orchestrating this blockade to isolate Qatar. Now his father seems to be softening Saudi's stance on that. Is this an example of MBS losing his influence, do you think?
I guess this is an example, actually, what the MBS is trying to do to a bit decrease the pressure on himself. Because, as you know, in the resolution that which is described, given at the Senate of the United States, there are some points that the United States Senate is asking. One is Yemen, stop the war in Yemen, and then start the isolation of the Qatar. And third, someone should be held responsible, accountable about what happened at the consulate of the Saudi Arabia in Istanbul. So the 2 points actually are in process of evaluation. For the first one, as I know, there is an now meeting between the parties in Yemen in Stockholm, which is the negotiation is still going on between the two parts first time. And the second, now the inviting Qatar to do this summit is another point that MBS is saying to the world, these are the things that I can give to you, but then don't ask me to be judged by and give a green light to be in a court and behave in a responsible way.
So he's giving a little bit, but not enough. I'm sure you've got quite passionate views about this particular question. Majub, what do you think? Is this invitation to Qatar a sign of softening?
I don't think so. I think let's remember there is no institution in Saudi Arabia which decides about foreign policy. Let's remember, foreign policy of Saudi Arabia was run by King Faisal and his son for 70 years. There was no institutions. It's a decision of the king and people surrounding him. Everything happened in Saudi Arabia since 2015, run by Mohammed bin Salman and his team, and making different steps and undermining international law, undermining the human rights, undermining the respect to the life of people. Everything has happened under the leadership in the last 3 years without considering any institution. So why we have to look at what's happening now as a soften? Because what's happened basically, it's a very normal situation to invite the leaders, all the GCC, including Qatar. And I'm not sure that Qatar will be interested actually to join this summit, especially knowing all of what's happened in the last 3 years, responsibility of Saudi Arabia, and looking at the blockade since 2017. So at least from, I would say, from Qatari perspective, this kind of invitation is by default should happen, but should not put a lot on expectation on this, because simply what happened to the Qataris in the last 1 year and a half is not acceptable by the leadership of Qatar and the people, and they say, okay, this is not enough to invite us. So I don't think so that this will change anything on what's happening in the Gulf. This shows the leadership of Saudi Arabia is trying to do something, but in the wrong time.
It doesn't look like he is going anywhere anytime soon. Gentlemen, thank you both so much for your contribution to our discussion today on Straight Talk.
Thank you.
Saddled between two continents and on the doorstep of some of the world's most troubled hotspots, Turkey has long been an attractive site for the world's intelligence organisations. From Cold War rivalries to the rise of global terror networks, international players have historically used Turkey as a stage for their covert operations. And as Omer Kablan explains, that unenviable role is still continuing.
Istanbul has long been a source of international intrigue when it comes to espionage. It set the stage for Agatha Christie's murder on the Orient Express and has been featured in James Bond films. But Istanbul's destination for spy thrillers goes beyond the big screen.
Your flight PA1 just landed Istanbul.
It's more a case of art imitating life. Intelligence agencies have been the eyes and ears of a country often operating in the shadows around the globe. Turkey's geostrategic position made it an ideal hub for intelligence gathering during the Cold War. But does that status still exist today? According to prominent Turkish journalist Murat Yetkin, there has been an uptick in foreign intelligence operations inside Turkey recently.
After the Syria civil war, almost all espionage agencies of the world became very active in this area, not only because of the Syria war itself, but because of being a part of this greater geography. It's a huge triangle, the Balkans to Caucasus and the Middle East, with extensions to Central Asia.
Given Turkey's proximity to the world's trouble spots, the country also has a long history of being a safe haven for dissidents across the Middle East. But opposition figures and government critics searching for refuge in Turkey have also drawn in foreign agents seeking intel on their targets. And it's not only been about gathering information. There have been numerous foreign intelligence operations inside Turkish borders, like the 2013 Rihan bombings in southern Turkey, where 53 people were killed. Turkish authorities concluded that the Syrian regime was responsible, saying evidence linked the bomber with the country's intelligence agency, the Syrian Muhabarat. Turkish security sources say the country's intelligence and police services have disrupted hundreds of potential foreign attacks since the Syrian civil war started in 2011. And most recently, the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. Turkish officials have said that a Saudi hit team led by intelligence agents was behind the murder. But according to intelligence experts, these methods aren't favored by foreign operatives. A popular tactic has been to recruit local collaborators. The former head of Turkey's military intelligence, Ismail Hakkı, knows firsthand what those operations entail.
Foreign intelligence organizations don't create new terrorist groups in their country of interest. They try to take advantage of your weaknesses by using internal actors. In Turkey, terror groups like the PKK, the DHKPC, and the Fethullah terrorist organization have been used and are continued to be used by foreign powers.
One example of that tactic, according to Turkish officials, was the 2016 assassination of the Russian ambassador Andrei Karlov. After more than 2 years, an indictment was finally released by the chief prosecutor in Ankara. It concluded that the gunman was part of the FETÖ terror network, which had coordinated with foreign intelligence agencies. In a time when modern diplomacy has seen former friends turn foe, the Turkish government has warned that the threats posed by foreign spy agencies are on the rise. And while Turkey certainly can't shake its strategic appeal, the game is to either contain those threats or play smarter and get the upper hand. Ahmad Kablan, Straight Talk.
And to discuss this further, I'm joined by David Lowe, who is a resident fellow at Leeds Beckett University and specialises in security and terrorism issues, and Barış Çalar, who is an assistant professor at MEF University's International Relations Department in Istanbul. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here on Straight Talk. Barış, I'm going to start with you. Why Turkey? Why have we seen this country be such a historical hotspot for a foreign intelligence gathering?
Yeah, right. Istanbul is one of the metropolises, and as each and every metropolis around the world, throughout history, it has been such a hub. I mean, Istanbul is a globalized city. It's not just a hub for intel, but it's a hub for business, an energy hub, migration, legal and illegal. So it's the all flows of globalization at a high speed goes through Istanbul. So from the Ottoman times up until today, we see such operations. But it's not just Istanbul, as I say. It's all around the world, at world large. Many metropolitan cities experience as such incidents and activities.
Mm-hmm. David, what does Turkey's geographical location, what role does that play? I mean, we are bordered by so many sort of hotbed countries. What role does that play in making this such an attractive intelligence community?
I think it plays a very important role. You know, you look at the various threats, not just to Turkey, but to European states, other states. I mean, we've had the terrorist threats, certainly from Islamist groups like Daesh, where Turkey, I know, played a key role in supporting not just Turkey, but other states. You look at the political situations with Iran, Turkey borders Iran, Turkey borders Iraq, and then you look towards Russia, and of course there are some quite frosty relationships between Russia and one or two Western states, including mine at the moment. So you can see the importance of working together benefits rather than working in isolation.
Even in popular culture, you know, where there's been long discussions about Turkey and its intelligence sort of position in movies, in films during World War II, during the Cold War, but is it still happening today? Are we walking around Istanbul amongst spies?
Oh, well, let's not get too carried away. I don't think it'll be like John le Carré films or whatever. But yeah, spying is basically using agents recruited in their own country. So spying is not quite like you see on the TV and the films, like James Bond or anybody like that. And it's a more subtle procedure. So agencies will handle and control agents, but also states can work together. Intelligence agencies, it makes so much sense. I know from my own experiences that the UK has worked closely with Turkey during the Daesh issue, with UK citizens travelling to or coming from. The great assistance that was given, now that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for intelligence. So that's one example of how it's working and still working today.
Barış, what do you think? What does modern intelligence gathering look like in modern day times? In a country like Turkey, hypothetically, what sort of operations could we see?
I mean, especially for Turkey, yeah. It's still actually, as Professor Lowe put it well, it's human-centered. It's human intel is the gist of it still. Mm-hmm. Because unlike movies, the stuff is different on the ground. So, and the geography determines the issue, the proximity to hotspots all around the world. Turkey is at the crossroads of continents, and all kinds of flows goes through it. One particular thing that can be readily said about Turkey and its intelligence capabilities, it's, as an academic for years, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, we can easily say that it's good at counterintelligence. That's how it survived for centuries, actually.
And what do you mean by that? Give us a bit more of an example. Human-centered
intel and counter-intel, because Syria and other side, Caucasus, Balkans and Europe, and of course during the Cold War, two blocks. Recently, as we discussed before the show actually with Mr. Law, recently MI6 chief named officially Russia as a national adversary. That's something. So all these fast-paced activities gather at the crossroads of continents to a higher extent, of course. That's how Turkey is a little bit more at the forefront because of the crossroads situation.
And also there's the issue of, again, we were discussing, obviously you can imagine we had our own chat before we came on, but you know, you look at cooperation. For example, the PKK is a prescribed terrorist group in the UK. The PKK pose no threat to the UK. Yes, but we have ethnic Turkish population, and it could be intelligence or information gathered that we would get, that we would then either deal with that individual and pass it on to Turkey. So Turkey's not working in isolation. It's good to know you've got friends.
I think that's an important point, isn't it? There's a lot to be said for the cooperation amongst countries with regards to intelligence gathering. Now, Turkey has long been considered a haven for dissidents from other countries. I mean, as an example, there are almost 10 TV networks based out of Turkey, run by various opponents to various governments around the world, which means a lot of dissidents are based here. Does that help or does that hinder the intelligence community?
Well, there's a bit of both. I mean, I think what's important is your freedom of expression. And it's important that we have that. That's what differentiates states like Turkey and UK and other states, that sort of liberal the democracy part of it. So that's important that they have their say. I think it's when people act upon and they start glorifying or promoting violence. Now that you've crossed the bounds now, that's where it is an issue. And I think that's where the cooperation should come in. But having distant groups with their own channels saying what they want to say, that's the price of a democracy, and I think is a good thing.
What do you think, Barış? The idea that dissidents are based in Turkey, does that play a role in maybe being able to extract information from a whole variety of different governments, because there is such a melting pot of different kind of political ideas?
Right, but I think more or less to the extent Mr. Lowe put it, because it may pay both kinds of dividends. Berlin or France and Paris or Istanbul, I mean, the big cities all host dissidents, and to a certain extent it is paying prices, or sometimes it has advantages. But intelligence is more on the alignments among states. During the Cold War, there was a structured alignment or alliance working. So the blocks were neat and determined, but now there's
these lines are all blurred.
Yes, continuously shifting alignments. That's why international cooperation on counterterrorism or other kinds of cooperation is uneasy. So this is shifting in flux. So that's where it changes.
I'm going to ask my final question to you, Barış, about the speculation that there is a connection between FETÖ and the CIA. What kind of role do you think FETÖ may play with either helping or hindering the dissemination of intelligence? Yeah,
definitely. I mean, definitely. FETÖ, terrorist organization, is not just related to one single state. It's a vehicle manipulated and used by several agencies, actually. It's a proxy, and in that sense, we cannot just get fixated on a certain country. If we recall, I mean, the structure they portray, they're across continents in many countries. So it's being used for different purposes, yes.
Is that something you would agree with?
Yeah, I would. I mean, obviously there's issues at the moment where there's strains. I mean, there's a bit of a strain between the UK and the US at the moment. You wouldn't think it, would you? But maybe with the current president and the government there, that may change. Because that's an important part. We have a Five Eyes: UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand and the US, we don't spy on each other, but we share intelligence, and that intelligence then, if deemed, will be passed on. But, you know, it is a shifting thing. Politically, we have to accept that. But I think underneath it all, we should work towards that common goal to support each other and keep people safe. That's the bottom line.
But that is what it is all about. So if it works effectively and if Turkey has to be the stage for it, then long may it continue. It's a very interesting topic, and I appreciate both of you being here to discuss it with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Melinda Nusufora. If you've got any comments, do share them with us on Twitter with the hashtag #StraightTalk. And also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.